Welcome to April. It is springtime. The sun is shining, which is nice for those of us out in the country who can go and enjoy it in our backyards. I guess if you're in the city, you need to isolate yourself a bit more, which means you're limited in the amount of time you can spend outside. So please take care, because a lack of sunlight can have issues, not only with your body not making enough vitamin D, but also with it not being able to make as much serotonin. This can make you more depressed, and like we need that right now on top of everything else. So not only stay safe, stay happy. I have full spectrum lights in my office for recording video, and that helps, so you might want to order some online, or you can actually get light therapy lamps, especially for dealing with mood disorders caused by lack of sunlight. I've got a link to an Amazon search in the description where you can check these out. Really, take care of yourselves out there. So let's go over the questions that $5 supporters asked in the month of March. And ordinarily I'd start with the first one, which is Chris, but he asked a question on the same subject as Tomasz Urbański, so I'll hold off on that and do them both at the same time. Pipsqueak asks, I've been thinking about the economic calculation problem recently, and it's bothering me that so many argue against central planning based on practicality, usually bringing up speed of calculation or the time delay of production. But even if you had a way of instantaneously gathering information and producing goods, you'd still fall short, because a central plan can't account for the infinite possibilities of new products. Your thoughts on this? Well, that's just one of a whole bunch of problems with it, because even if you just look at the existing products, even if you could get this information instantaneously, it would change before you had a chance to act on it. And let me take care of another issue socialists have. They say, well, if a central planner can't get the information they need, how can a business? They can't get that information either, right? And they're absolutely correct. Apple can't even tell for sure how many iPhones to send to different stores. Some places sell out while others still have them on the shelf. So what's the difference? Well, either way there's a risk, but the business is only taking the risk for themselves. If they screw up, it's bad for their business. And yeah, it's bad because workers will be affected too. But at least it doesn't affect everyone. The central planner takes risks for everybody. If they screw up, the whole economy is affected. Ironically, generally everyone except them, since they're usually politicians and bureaucrats who don't have to face accountability for their actions. So businesses have an incentive to get it right. Government doesn't. Josh Havins asks, what's the best resource I can use to direct webmasters on how to implement Squirrel onto their websites? Well, that would be squirrel.grc.com, sqrl.grc.com. Although it's still pretty limited since a lot of server solutions are still being built. But in addition to WordPress and Drupal plugins, there's Squirrel for .NET, which is middleware for implementing Squirrel into any ASP.NET solution, and there's a solution for setting up Squirrel to work on any system that uses OAuth 2. There's also the Squirrel server solutions where you can implement Squirrel using a fairly simple API. Also, thank you for making that video on government misinformation on cybersecurity. People desperately need to get accurate information on cybersecurity, and the government sucks at it. Absolutely! One of the marketing terms that always drove me nuts was military-grade encryption, when if anything the military has always been behind the rest of us. And really, they just use the same off-the-shelf crypto that's available to the rest of us. But I do feel I have to mention the US Navy as a remarkable exception to that. They've always been on the leading edge of crypto implementation and even a lot of development. And that makes sense when you realize that if you're on a ship in the ocean, the only way you can talk to anyone else is wirelessly. And that's fairly easy for anyone to snoop on. If an enemy power has its ship nearby or in the communication pathway, you don't want them being able to decode your transmissions. That's why the Office of Naval Research has put so much funding into Tor. They need a solution like that. Even though other government agencies have tried to attack Tor, they haven't put anywhere near the level of support into that as the Naval Office has into developing and securing it. Small vulnerabilities are found and fixed in Tor all the time, but no one has been able to break the core protocol, not even the NSA after throwing everything they had at it. So now let's cover the questions Chris and Thomas had. Chris wants to know, why do you think that so many atheists suddenly throw all their rationality and reasoning out when it comes to politics and economics? It just really bothers me how many of these people who can call out bogus to religion and pseudoscience fall for political fallacies. But Thomas has an interesting experience with it. When I've met people that were openly atheists for the first time, around 2006 onwards they were very pro-capitalism. And searching Polish web for rationalist forums and blogs, it was also the case, atheist equals pro-capitalism. Somewhere between 2009 and 2014, I wasn't following what was happening in such communities. But when searching for basically the same type of content, atheism and rationalists, after 2015, I've noticed two things. Google was flooded with Christian sites, and even when I found something non-Christian, it was economically centrist at best. Do you see maybe a similar trend in other countries? Well, that really hasn't ever been the case here. Although there have been quite a number of atheist libertarians, most of them really latched onto the government as a replacement for God. They've actually discovered that there's a part of the brain that tries to deal with mysteries or incomplete information that tends to fill it in with a belief in God or the supernatural. Well, these people stopped believing in God, and probably even the supernatural, but they end up satiating that part of the brain with government. Because government can change ethics, morality, and even the laws of physics and mathematics by putting words on paper, provided they go through the proper ritual needed to call it the law or a regulation. The issue is, it isn't just a matter of realizing there's no evidence for a god or any other kind of supernatural force. You have to train your brain to avoid this tendency, because if you don't, if you have anything that can fill in that gap, whether it's a political affiliation or a set of talking points or whatever, your brain will just patch up that crack with it and go about its business. This is why you so often ask someone a direct question and get a complete non-answer. Whatever their response is, the talking points or whatever, that's their brain's way of avoiding the feeling of confusion that's there to alert you that something is wrong with your beliefs or your view of the universe. If your beliefs, whether they're religious or political or whatever, end up causing you to avoid that feeling of confusion, then you can't be more confused by fiction than by reality. The trick is to train yourself to realize when you're confused. They haven't done that. As to why your experience might be different, I can only speculate, but the timing of it and the fact that Poland was so recently under the thumb of a socialist superpower, I think leads me to believe that the atheists in the past realized that socialism doesn't work, and so they didn't have that fantasy to replace their god with. But now, starting around 2015, just where you've said, you've got to the point where people who are too young to remember life under socialism are now adults, and they're able to affect policy and the overall conversation. Like I said, it's just speculation, but it's always amazing just how few people who've actually lived under socialism end up being socialists themselves. Okay, that's it for the March questions. If you'd like to ask a question for April, just become a $5 supporter and use the links in the video description. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and subscribe and share this video everywhere to help make up for YouTube shadow banning. Also, YouTube tends to demonetize videos like this, so if you don't see an ad, how about making a small contribution? You can do so at donate.bogosity.tv using PayPal or crypto, or becoming a regular supporter at Patreon or Subscribestar, or watch my videos on bittube.tv, which is always monetized and never censored. Until next time, stay strong and be free.